Hey, good morning. Happy Friday. I think it's still morning, right? Yeah, okay. So I'm almost on the cusp of lunchtime. I thought I was going to get this out earlier today and do this live earlier, but we actually had a market yesterday, and I was going through and seeing what we sold out of, which is fantastic. If you were at the Westboro Farmers Market in Massachusetts yesterday, thank you so much for coming out. It's always a joy to see everybody, talk with everybody. And I could talk about crochet all day, every day. And I am a maker from home. So it's nice to be able to get out and see how everybody responds to things and also talk about crochet. And that's actually why I wanted to do a live today. So just like we did a live a couple of days ago about some of the things that do really well at the market for us so that you guys can learn along, join our community, and hopefully have some good makes that do well for you at your markets. Or if you want to make things and give them as gifts or you just enjoy crafting, that's why we're making these tutorials. So yesterday, one of the things that we sold out of were these little Frankenstein monsters. And they work up pretty quick and easy. I made this pattern just a few weeks ago, actually, when I was kind of playing around and getting ready for some art festivals we have coming up. And I was thinking about Halloween. I don't know if you're like me. I am really into the spooky season. I really lean into it. My whole family gets into it. Anyway, so I was kind of like playing around with different items and came up with this little Frankenstein monster as a quick thing to have in a market that, and just see how it went in person. If people liked them, if how they responded to them, and they responded very well. So I thought, let's do it together today. So because we sold out of them yesterday at the market, I have a little picture here of what the goal of the final product is going to be. This is what we're going to make today. If you are like a brand new maker, I'm going to try to go over things. It's a series of simple stitches, but if you've never done crochet again, I might recommend going onto YouTube and finding some other quick tutorials of things, how to do a single crochet, how to do a magic ring. I'm going to go over them really quickly. But because I'm facing you guys this way today instead of my hands, it's going to be a little bit harder to see those like intricacies of where exactly to put the hook. But with that being said, let's crochet. And if you don't want to crochet this, you just want to have a chat, or you love crochet, or you have a family member who used to crochet, or I've had a lot of people who have young kids trying to learn how to crochet. Join in, say hi, leave a comment. I'll try to get to as many questions as I can as I go along. I'll try to keep talking to you guys. But otherwise, the goal today is to make this little Frankenstein monster. He's about 4 to 6 inches tall, depending on how you do your stitches and how much you stuff him. So this, again, is what we're making today because we sold out at yesterday's farmer's market. So we got to make some more. And I have some customers who pre-ordered them. So we got to get to it. So thank you everyone who is joining. So to get started, I'm using my 6mm hook. This is a clover hook, definitely my favorite. I have them in like every size and shape. You probably can't see them back there, but this is what we're using for this one. I have some 20mm eyes. For this particular one, I'm going to be using glitter eyes. Now, this manufacturer that I'm using today, they send all of the backings in different colors like this. So you're actually able to change and add to we'll remove this plastic later, don't worry, but just to keep it nice and fresh. But you basically add the color on the background, which is really nice and versatile. So sometimes I think I want a certain color, and then I put it on and I go, no way. So that's why I like these particular ones. So we're using two 20mm safety eyes today. Again, like I say in all of my videos, if you're planning on using safety eyes, they recommend that you don't use these for anything that you're making for a child under the age of 3. As you can imagine, these bigger ones aren't as much of a risk, but when you have the smaller sized ones, if they were ever to fall off, if the backing were ever to fall off, even though they're called safety eyes, we just want to be cognizant of kids putting things in their mouths. So I always say, and it's widely accepted in the community, at least 3 years old and over for anything that's going to have a safety eye. If it's for somebody that's a younger kid or someone who has a propensity to put things in their mouth, embroider your eyeballs. Just better to be safe than get that call. We are going to be using some embroidery scissors, but honestly, any scissors you have lying around are fine. I'm going to be using some stitch markers. These just help us keep track of where we are. And then I'm also going to have 2 embroidery needles. These are my absolute favorite. I talked about it in our last live for way too long, but I love them. So they're embroidery needles with a slight tilt to them. I use this one for my bulky yarns, this for my basic acrylic or cotton yarns, and they just make your life so much easier. The style of crocheting that we're doing today, amigurumi, it's a spiral. So when we're doing certain things, when we want to close things off, we're going in and out a lot, and this makes a huge difference. I believe I have them linked in our website in our how-to section at rokkitcrafts.com. You can go, and I think I have links to some of these things that I like to use, affiliate links, and I believe it's in the one with the mushroom, but I'll have to go check it out again later. Okay, so we got all of that. The last things we're going to need is obviously the yarn. So for this particular guy, we're using a blanket yarn. This one happens to be Bernat's baby yarn in green. And then blanket yarn, not the baby, but blanket yarn in black. That's for the hair. And then we're going to have some little cute details that we're going to be adding to him. So I have some black yarn, which we're going to use for the mouth, and a little bit of red yarn that we're going to use for the little scar. As a reminder, for those just joining, this is the little guy we're making today because we ran out at yesterday's market. It's a little Frankenstein guy. Works up super fast. Great as a filler at your markets if you're starting to get into that. Oh, lastly, how could I forget? We're going to need some stuffing. This is just good old polyfill. It's a polyester-based stuffing. It's a fiber fill. You can get it pretty much everywhere, and I do, depending on price sometimes. So that's what we're going to be using. Not too much of it today. So with that, let me know as I'm going if you have any questions. I'm just going to make sure I put up here. There we go. That way I can see your questions as they're coming in. Otherwise, let's get going. So today, this particular pattern, I will be putting up the printed version of it. I have it just written here. As you can tell, this is a pattern that I made myself. So lots of scribbles and cutouts. But this is how I know kind of where we're going and what I'm using. I will type this up and get it up on our Instagram on our website later today, so you guys have a version that you can like refer back to if that's easier. Now let's get started. So again, starting with our 6mm hook, we're going to start with the hair. So the Frankenstein monster that I created starts with a magic ring circle. Some people prefer to start with chaining on and then connecting it into a circle. But again, we're doing an amigurumi style, which means we're basically going around in a spiral, in a circle, and you just keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. So you don't have to sew each row. You don't have to go back and forth. So it works out really fast and really well. So I'm going to cast on. So I'm going to start with my magic ring for those who are new to magic rings. I know it's a question I get it all the time when I'm doing live events. So we're going to start with our little circle here. And I apologize, everything's going to be backwards for you guys today because I'm not showing you my hands like I normally do. I'm talking straight to you. So we're going to go up through our round, around, a yarn over, pull up. So we have like a little V here. We're going to yarn over again and pull through. That's going to give us the top of our magic ring. And then we're just going to do 6, actually in this one, I'm sorry, we're going to do 8 single crochets into that loop. And we're going to go over our tail because that's going to allow us to pull our circle tight and close that very center portion so it's nice and smooth. So I'm going to do 8. So we're going to go 1 single crochet, 2 single crochets, and for anybody who is a maker, you know black yarn is notoriously hard to crochet with because it's hard to see the stitches. So I always recommend a area of bright light if you are going to be doing black yarn. So I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we have 8 stitches, and see how we have this big gap, and it's more like a horseshoe right now than a circle, and that's not going to do. So we're going to just slowly, let's do it towards you guys so you can see. When we pull this little tail, it's going to bring us all together. Now with blanket yarn, you want to pull firmly, but not too hard because it does break. It's not like acrylic. So I'm going to bring this close to me. And that's just so I can feel the tension with these 2 fingers as I'm pulling that yarn because I want it to close, but I don't want to break it. And sometimes if you, there we go. So now we actually have a circle instead of a U shape. So now we're ready to go. Now, with amigurumi, like I said, you're going to go around and around and around. Some people at this stage prefer to do a slip stitch and a chain one. Oh my gosh, I use stitch markers all the time for black yarn. It's the only way to do it, especially chunky black yarn or super lightweight. You're very, very right. um, so for this one, what I'm going to do, I'm not going to do the chain and I'm sorry, the slip stitch chain method. I'm really just going to go all the way around because it's blanket yarn and we're doing such a small little guy. It doesn't make sense. It keeps it simple. So before I start, because in the next round, we're going to be doing increases, stitch markers. So with stitch markers, just like when you're doing any project, you know, you have your little V's. So each V is a stitch for those who are new with us. This is going to go, I prefer to put them in the full stitch because sometimes we do things just in the back loop, sometimes just in the front loop. For this particular project, we're always going to do, except for one time, always going to do in the full stitch. So I like to put them directly underneath that full V. And that way, if I'm talking, if I'm listening to podcasts, if I'm watching a video, if my kids are yelling, if I'm cooking at the same time, I remember exactly where I left off. So they're super helpful. There are times when the crochet gods that are out there are not meshing well with me, and I have put a stitch marker in every single stitch, black yarn especially, just so I can stay exactly where I am. So that I'm not going to do that today. It would take too much time, and I do want to be able to make this whole thing for you today. So first row is just a magic ring with 8 single crochets. The next row we're just going to do we're just doing straight up increases. So an increase, as a reminder, for this particular one is we're just going to do 2 single crochets in each individual stitch. So just like we put our stitch marker in both parts of the single crochet, we're going to do that again. So we're going to do that for every stitch. So we should end up with 18 because we're doubling the amount that we had before. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And again, for anybody who is an avid crocheter already, I will have this pattern up on my Instagram and website in my how-to section at rokkitcrafts.com later today. So you guys can just have a pattern to refer to so that if there's anything that I went over too quickly or you can't remember exactly the order because I was chatting too much in between rows, now you know. You will have access to it. Okay, so once I hit my stitch marker, I always put my stitch marker in the last stitch. Some people prefer to put it in the first stitch. It kind of is like, for me, a little reminder, oh, this is the end of the row and that I need to finish up. So we're doing 2. Just like that, we have 16. Should we count and see if I actually did it? Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 13, 14, 15, 16. Yep, we're good. So you can tell by looking at the V's. Again, black yarn is so much harder, but we're going to be migrating over to green very soon once we get his hair done. So you won't have to worry about it. So just like I said, we're going in the round. So you don't have to worry about slip stitching and chaining. I'm just going to keep going, which is why this particular project is super nice when you're vegging or you want to do this with while something else is going on. I tend to love to watch horrible streaming TV, like Love Island UK or something like that. So I don't actually have to be paying crazy attention because I'll just use my stitch markers and just keep going around. So for row 3, we're going to do a single increase and then an increase, and we're going to do that pair 8 times. So we should end up with 24 stitches at the end. And then we're going to do one more row of black all the way around before we switch colors. So I'm going to do a single crochet, increase. So think for every 2 stitches, you're now going to have 3. Okay, single increase, single crochet, increase. I think you get the idea. So I'm just going to go around quickly now. If you're following along, I'm impressed with your ability to grab yarn that quickly because we just started, but you're more than welcome to. And of course, at any time, let me know if you have any questions, thoughts. If you have any questions about crochet, if you have any questions about doing farmers markets or art markets and what type of things work well for us, If you have any questions about us or me, feel free to ask along, and I will do my best to keep checking up on you every once in a while in case something came in. Okay. Okay, now I'm at that stitch. So I'm going to take that out, do my final increase. We're getting close to having some hair for our Frankenstein monster. So here's our nice little circle. So right now it's kind of curling in a little bit. I do very tight stitches. So what I end up doing is once I get my shape, I pull towards me. I like a lot of tension. I don't know if you can tell from some of my previous makes. I like a lot of tension in my items. I don't like gaps. They bother me for whatever reason. I know everyone has a different style. But when I make items, I like them to have super tight stitches like that. So that just means that sometimes you have to finagle with things a little bit just to make sure they're getting to the shape that you want. Okay, so now we just did row 3. This is just me looking down at what I did. So now what we're going to do is, remember how earlier I was saying that every stitch has a front and a back? It's like a little V. You have one in the front, one in the back. For this particular round, because we want the shape of the head to come down and curl, and I want it to be really abrupt, because Frankenstein, if you think about it, kind of has like a more rectangular head than a rounded head like you might see in a traditional plushie. So the way that I get that super flat top hair is I only work for one round in the back portion of the stitch. So like I said, every stitch has that V. So we're going to work in just this back one for this round, and that's going to give us that nice flat. So if you're making something that you want to be able to sit flat really well too, so for example, sometimes I make like cactuses or flower pots or something that just needs a nice flat bottom in order to sit nicely, this is a great way to do that. So we're going to do just one single crochet in the back stitch only for 24 stitches. So let's do it. So again, I'm finding where that V is. Only in the stitch farthest away from me is the back loop. We're going to do one in each stitch, and that's going to give us that nice flat bottom. 3. I guess technically a nice flat top because it's going to be his hair on the top of his head. Okay. Welcome to everyone who's joining us. We are making a Frankenstein monster today, which is a small item that does really, really well at our farmers markets. And we sold out yesterday, so we got to make some more. It's a nice, quick item to make. It's one of those great $10 grab-and-go items that grab attention, and you can make them up quickly if you have a market coming up soon, or if you just need something really, really cute for gifts or decor. This is one of those types of crochet projects. Okay, so we're just doing back loop only, single crochet all the way around. Sorry, I'm going a little slow because again, I'm using black yarn, so I got to pay attention. And coming up, and one of the reasons I wanted to do this tutorial too, because so many people I talked to yesterday are just getting started with crochet. And I say, welcome to the community. Once you get used to it. I know it takes a little bit of practice, but once you get used to it, there's a huge community online, on TikTok, on Instagram, of people that are always creating, always making, and everywhere you go, someone will come up to you and say, my mom used to crochet, my son's learning how to crochet, I got this wonderful blanket once, and I wish I knew how to make it. And I always say, you can make it. It's not, just think of it as a series of knots, guys. But what's great about this pattern is even though it works up really fast, we're going to be doing increases, decreases, single crochets, bobble stitches, color change, back loop only. So it's like a nice little beginner go, you know what I mean? It's like we're going to hit a couple different tasks. You learn how to use safety eyes, how to make things have a little bit of more character. If you're just getting used to adding eyeballs or how to add cute little faces, this does that all. So keep going. Oh, you just started crocheting in Christmas. That is fantastic. Keep going. How's it going so far? Tell me about it. If you have any questions while I'm doing this, let me know. So I just ended my round. We just did our back loop only. So see how it's like a nice crisp edge there? That's what is going to give Frankenstein that like flat top. And again, It's really great if you're going to make something that needs to sit flat on the bottom and not fall over. Using just the back loop only of your single crochet really helps with that shape. So now, remember how I said we're going to learn multiple skills today? Oh, twin mommy. Hi, I'm a twin mommy. I just had to say that because it popped up. I have twin boys. They are 10 and they inspire many of my makes, and they steal a lot of the stuff I make too. A Snorlax, that's awesome. I made a tiny Snorlax, Joy, a few years ago. And how did it go? That's pretty awesome to start with. That's a big project. Anyway, sorry, I'll talk all day. So we just did our row 4 of our back loop onlys. Now we're going to do our color change. So it sounds intimidating. It is not. There are 5 million different ways of doing color changes, and there's ones that are really great at no showing. I'm going to do a super basic color change for the purpose of this because we're doing it in blanket yarn. We have a little bit of flexibility because it's so floofy and it merges well together that even if you make a little bit of a mistake, it's okay. So for a basic color change, what I'm going to do, usually I do it in the last stitch of what I am making, but for the ease of today, I'm just going to do it in the first stitch. So this is going to be the first stitch of round 5. I'm going to go in like I normally would. This is for a single crochet. So I'm going to go in like I normally would. I'm going to go in, I'm going to yarn over. If you yarn under, you can do that too. So I'm going to go in, yarn over, pull through, and then normally you would go back over, right, and yarn over. For the color change, instead of doing it like that, I'm actually going to introduce my new color now. So I'm going to hold it down, and I'm going to treat it like I would this exact same one. So sometimes I even just put them right next to each other, and I hold them together to make it easier. So I can, like I said, I love tight tension with my yarn. I love tight stitches. So it helps me with the tension because it's keeping this one tight and keeping this one exactly where I want it. 36 inches, that's a huge one, Joy. I have to be careful how I say things. That is a very large Snorlax plushie that you made. That's very awesome. So you'll see that I now have this one on my hook. So you can't see the color change yet from the outside, but on the inside you can see it's now casted on. So instead of having to do a single crochet or a slip stitch or anything like that, it's like a nice little trick. And we're going to go back and we're going to tie this together, but for now I just hold it on and it won't go anywhere because again, we're using blanket yarn, super forgiving. So for Frankenstein's face, we did our color change. Now this is the best part. We're just going to go around and around, guys. His head is pretty cylindrical. We're making something that's very basic. So we're just going to go all the way around. Single crochet, 24 stitches. Okay. This is a great time if you guys have any crochet questions. Go ahead and throw them at me because we're just going to be going around and around. And so I can multitask. And the goal is we're going to go, I believe it is 7 rows of just going around and around. Now you can kind of see why you can zone out a little bit and just use those stitch markers. And every time you take a stitch marker out, just make a little notation on your paper, or actually I have been known, if I have a ballpoint pen, to make a little stitch on the back of my hand. Like remember when we used to all write on the back of our hands when we were in grade school? Well, sometimes I still do, I gotta say, especially if I'm watching something or listening to something and I don't have paper right in front of me. That's what I'll do. So for the ease of what we're doing today, once I get to this final stitch, I'm actually going to tie together where I did the color change so that I can take off this and I don't have to worry about getting tangled on myself. The best part of this method too, when we're doing a plushie versus if we were doing a blanket or like a sweater, we don't have to weave in our ends. Did you hear that? We do not have to weave in our ends for the color change because we're going to be filling him. So I just did my last stitch. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to pull this out really quickly and just be careful. I'm not going to put my stitch marker in and lose it all, but I am going to put it down for a second. I'm going to flip this guy inside out just so you can see exactly where that color change took place on the inside. So all I'm going to do is tie a super simple knot and just make sure I'm pulling away from where those stitches are because we are going to come back around. So we need to make sure we don't get too close to those stitches or else it can be harder to get in there because the tension will be too tight. I'm just going to do a super simple knot. Sometimes I do a couple extra just if I'm feeling like I want to make sure. And I'm just going to cut off. And again, for this pattern, we don't have to weave in the ends. We leave it on the, because it's going to all be on the inside. In fact, sometimes my remnants, so I have, when I'm making things, a lot of the time I'll have a mason jar next to me and I'll just plop these into the mason jar as I go, especially if I'm making like, if I'm getting ready for a market and I have to make like 20 of these in one day, I'll take those, I'll throw them in, and then towards the end, it's a great filler. So instead of using your polyfill, you can use a bunch of your blanket yarn, works just as well. So you can see when I turn it back inside out, it's all on the inside, so no one's ever going to see it. So why weave it in? You don't need to. It's tied off, it's secure, it's not going anywhere. Okay, so that was our first row. I'm just going to get some length here. I am pulling from the center, but it keeps getting snagged because we all know that beautiful nest that sometimes lives in there. Okay, so like I said, we're just going around 7 times. So we just did our first time of 7. So let's just go around again. So again, single crochet all the way around till you get to your stitch marker. So this will be our second row. Sometimes I count just to make sure I didn't zone off too much and skip something or do something like that. I know magic circles are so hard, Logan. I know. It takes a little bit of practice, takes a little time. When I'm going to post this video later, at the very beginning of the video, I went over some tricks on how to do the magic ring, but it's the number one question I get anytime I go to a market or anytime I'm doing a live. Magic rings, man, they are, and the good thing is keep going. Don't give up, okay? If you're really having a hard time with the magic ring, you can always still just chain and slip stitch. So for this particular one, I did a magic ring, but if you can't get the hang of it, it's okay. You can just literally, for this one, you would do 8. So you would do a slip stitch, chain 8, make your circle, and then you slip stitch into the first chain so you make a circle. And then just make sure that when you hit it, when you get all the way back to the other end, that you crochet over your tail so that you can still pull it tight. And this is all based on a circle. So if the magic ring is just giving you a hard time, don't worry about it. You can stick with the chain too. So don't let that make you give up, because I know sometimes it's the little things and we give up. Don't give up. Feel free to ask any questions though. I can see if I can help you out. Yeah, I do. So I'll have this one up later, but I have a couple other tutorials. So we always post our lives on our website along with the pattern. So if you go to rokkitcrafts.com in the how-to section, you'll see a copy of the live video and also the written pattern. So the other day we did a pickle, this guy, another really great one for markets and conversation starters and a funny gift. And in that, I also did the magic circle. So you can take our magic ring. So you can take a look at the beginning of that one if you don't want to wait until this one comes out. I totally get that. And see how I did it. YouTube has so many great tutorials also from all different creators and makers. And every crocheter that I've ever met has been wonderful and kind and willing to educate. So there's so many people out there willing to give you a hand. If you're local, I would tell you to come find us. If you haven't been in Massachusetts, yesterday at the market that I was at, I literally sat there with this wonderful new crocheter named Sasha. Was showing her how I do the magic circle, how I do some of the hats and things like that. So if you ever go to a market and you see somebody who does the crochet or knits, I'm telling you, I've never met one that isn't willing, first of all, that has some crochet like yarn in their purse or their pocket. We're always bringing it with us. And we usually have it with us and a hook with us. So it's worth an ask to say, hey, I've been really trying to figure out how to do that magic ring. And I've watched tutorials. I just can't get the hang of it. Can you show me in person? And I would be very surprised if they didn't allow you. So you're in Washington. I wish I could help you right there. But like I said, we can watch the videos we have. Go to a local market, go to a local art shop, anywhere that you see crochet. Crochet, for those who don't know, it cannot be manufactured. It can only be hand done because of the way it's made. So if you see a crocheted item at a market, most likely that person made it right in front of you, so you can ask them questions. And we're usually pretty good about sharing our tips. Okay, so again, I'm just going around and around with single crochets for Frankenstein's head, and we're doing 7 rounds. And soon we will add some eyes and some features to kind of give them that. For this particular one, we're doing a cutesy style. This is a great thing that fits right in the palm of your hand. It's nice and soft and squishy. Yes, Logan, go to school. Thanks for your questions. Thanks for commenting. I appreciate it. Come back another time. The particular eyes that I have for this one, the safety eyes, these 20mm safety eyes, you can get them anywhere. I think these particular ones I happen to get off of Amazon. When I put up the pattern later, I will make sure to put a link in there for you so that you can see the ones that I got. They come in a big pack, and basically they have different backings that you can use. So these ones happen to be the glitter silver, but they have all different colors. So basically you take your safety eye and you can add the color, and that way you can have whatever color you want. There's plastic on here right now just for while I'm crocheting so I don't scratch it. We'll take that off when we're all done. But that's where I get these particular safety eyes. I usually recommend that you get them. There are creators, especially on Etsy, that make their own safety eyes. So anytime you can support other artists, I recommend it. Versus, but sometimes, you know, Amazon has everything and you need it in a hurry. That's usually where I go. Just make sure you check your check where it's coming from and check the manufacturing recommendations, because not all of them are up to the same quality. And so if you're going to be using safety eyes, again, I recommend safety eyes for items that are going to be for 3 years or older, just because they're plastic, they're small. They say they're safety eyes, but they can still fall off. Make sure they're good quality. So make sure you check the reviews. Again, I usually recommend going to Etsy. There's a lot of great artists. There's even some on TikTok that I've seen. So if you can support other artists and the way that they make them, that's always great. But yes, Amazon, you can get them. I've gotten some from Joann's and Michael's before. They might not have all of the styles you want, and they come in smaller packs. So when I think I got a pair, I was making a cow, and Joann's had the brown eyes, which was great, but they only had, you know, like 2 at a time. So you might not be able to get a large amount, but if you just need it for one item or one plushie, that's the way to go. You're very welcome, Scotty. Thanks for the question. Okay, so we're getting closer. We got 5. We're going to do 2 more roundabouts, and then we'll add some eyeballs. Okay. I'm going to keep trying to look up in case any more questions come in. Thanks for joining me this morning. Like I said, we're filling in some stock. We did a market yesterday. We're in Massachusetts. I work with 3 other ladies. We all do this out of the love of our hearts of art. We all do different things. So I'm our crocheter. There's one other crocheter. There's a jewelry maker. And there's a painter. And we just love to create. And we love to share creation. We're making a Frankenstein monster, a small one. I'll show you a picture. This is what it'll look like. So this is a great one that we sold out yesterday in our market. So we have to fill in. We already have some people who did some pre-orders. So we got to make a bunch today. So I thought I would take you along because it's a great way to get up on some crochet skills. Because we do a bunch of different things. We do increases, decreases, bobbles, color changes. And so it's a great way to get up to speed if you're just learning how to crochet. Okay. Thank you. Okay, I think we have, if I counted correctly, we should have 1 more round of single crochet in the green, and then we're going to add some eyes and some little facial features. Like I said, this one's a quick one to make and really beginner friendly. If you've gotten past that first area of you learned how to do your chains, you learned how to do your slip stitches, you have done your single crochets, and now you're like, okay, what can I apply these skills to? This is a great one, and you'll learn a couple new things too with the color changes. And we're actually going to do a bobble stitch. Now, for those who that sounds absolutely intimidating, you do not need to do the bobble stitch. You do not technically need to do anything. I'm saying this is art. Treat it as such. Make it yours. change it up, make it taller, fatter, different shades of colors, different eyeballs, more creepy, more happy. This is all about what you make it, and that's what's awesome about crochet is everything you make is customizable. Everything you make should reflect you or the person you're giving it to. It's not mass produced. It's all by hand. You cannot mass produce crochet. Yet. I'm sure someday someone will figure it out how to do it. But as of right now, they have still not figured out how to mass produce crochet, and I prefer it that way. I hope it stays that way. Okay, so I just did my last round going around and around and around. So I'm going to put my stitch marker in that just so it stays put while we do our next things. So here's where we're at. You can kind of see he's coming together. So now we got to give him some personality. He needs some eyeballs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down. So I'm going to see where my tail is. I'm going to consider that the back. Really, you don't have to. Say you kind of did some messing up on this side because everything we're doing today is simple and cylindrical. Say you kind of flubbed it or have big gaps here and you don't want to go all the way and frog it and restart, but this part is beautiful and perfect, use this side. It's okay because we're just going around and around. No stress. For purposes of today, I'm going to use this as my back middle. I'm going to fold them in half just so I can kind of see where I want to put them. For this particular one, I put his eyes, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Excuse me. 5 rows down from the color change. And it looks like 1, 2, 3 in between. So if I count down each row, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, pop them in. And all I'm doing right now is checking my placement. I'll add the color and the backings later. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Look good to you? Works for me. So now because I'm doing glitter eyes for this one, I'm just going to keep an eye of where I put that. Add my color. Pop it back in. And again, the plastic is just on here so I don't scratch it by accident. Excuse me. Sorry, just give me a minute. Okay, so there's where we're at. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. So now I'm going to add my backings. So for this, I'm going to turn them inside out. And because I'm using blanket yarn, there's not as much space for the backings. So for this particular one, I'm going to do them this way. I'm ready for the snap. Let's see if I can get it. Oh, there we go. Then I do a test. Pull, pull, pull. And you give and you give. Sometimes I'll put hot glue on if it only does like one snap, just to make sure. And let's do the other side. There we go. Again, check, check, check. And again, as a reminder, I only use safety eyes for individuals who are at least 3 years and up, because even though it's on there really, really good, you never know. And just like you see with plushies you might buy in the store, anything could potentially come off depending on how it's used. I have a bunch of boys personally, and I've seen them do things to stuffies that really destroyed them. I didn't even know it's possible. So always keep aware of that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little smirk. So I'm going to take my acrylic yarn and my embroidery needle that is tilted. My trick for those who have difficulty getting your yarn into your hooks, what I do is I fold it like this and give it a little twist. And that just makes it so you're not using the fray edge of your yarn, just like if you were using thread, because we are using a multiple ply. And that really helps me get it in there without fraying my yarn most of the time. Not always, but most of the time. See? There you go. So what's cool about these is, like I said, you can add whatever personality that you want. So what I like to say is, say you're in a meh mood. Meh. Or in a subtle mood. Say you're in a happy mood, I would go up, down, and then go one stitch under in between, up and out, and back in the same hole. Now he's happy. So you gotta get the out and back in the same hole. Now he's happy. So you gotta get the idea. One, I'm going to be making a little smirk, like he has a little secret. So what I'm going to do is, again, get my yarn on the hook. So I'm going to go like, I think 2 below the eye. So 1 and 2. Okay. I'm going to go right in the middle. Making sure I'm pulling the right side. Oh, and of course my hair's in there. Okay, if you are a crocheter, a knitter, a sewer, how often do you find that you are now embroidering with your hair? It is a joy of making. There we go. That's why I say crocheting is you're making it literally with your blood, sweat, and tears and hair. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up kind of at an angle, one up. Okay. And I'm just going to pull him down a little bit. He's got like a little smirky smirk going on. I know sometimes it's hard to tell because we don't have fluff in him yet. So he kind of has like a little smirk. What I might actually do, I'm going to make it a little bit bigger so you guys can see it because I'm kind of doing subtle things that you might not be able to tell because of the medium we're using today. So I'm going to make it a little bit bigger so you can see it. See? Just a little smirky smirk. So I basically went in that last row. So what is that? Row 11. I just went in the middle. I went up a row and over 2. You see that? And then what I can do is I can kind of pull it down like that, give him more of a smirk. Now, if you want a really strong angle, what you can do is go down a stitch below and kind of force it by going up and up, just like what we did with the smile, when I was showing you the smile. So I just go under again and then go back through. You can kind of manipulate. See, that's like a stronger angle. But I'm going to leave it nice and soft because this is a nice, soft, friendly Frankenstein monster. We just want it to look like, he might know something. But he's still approachable and kind. Here we go. So then what I'm going to do is, again, when I'm doing this at home quickly, I would just kind of tie it off right here. For you guys, I'm just going to turn them inside out so you can get a better look. This is what we're looking like on the inside. So I'm just going to do a very simple knot. Again, because of the type of crochet we're doing, we're not going to have to weave in ends, which is fantastic. We can just leave them on the inside because we're going to fill her up and these won't come through. So I'm just going to do a couple little knots here. And then the next thing we're going to do, you're going to grab your red yarn and we're going to make a little scar. And make these your own. Do different facial expressions. If you don't like scars, don't put scars. It's all good. Okay, so now I put them back inside out. You can kind of see where we're going, right? So now I'm going to take my red yarn. And same thing, I'm going to fold over so I don't have to worry about trying to get those ends undone. I'm going to pull it through. Now for this one, I'm going to do it above the eye. So we're going to make it like a little red scar. So I'm going to go like one above and over. And see, can you see my needle? I know it's kind of hard to see. So I'm going right there. And I'm going to angle in so that when somebody looks at it from the front, they can see it from the front. You can put him anywhere. He can be covered in scars. He can have no scars. It's completely up. I'm going to come up at an angle. I'm going to go like right. What's nice about the blanket yarn is because the stitches are so big, when you're sewing with a smaller yarn, you can actually go in between the stitches. You don't have to only put your needle in the big stitches, which I think is really fun because then I can really customize it to the size. So I'm going to go up a little bit here. I'm not going to go fully up to the hairline. I'm going to go slightly below it. Okay, I'm going to go at an angle. like that. So that's kind of like his first little cut. Now I'm going to add the cross stitches. So the cross stitches will look, so if you look at my zombie kitty, you have like little cross stitches, right? Just to give it a little bit more of a scar look to it. And you can make them as big or as little as you need. Stay, kitty. There we go. Okay, so that's all I'm going to do. So to do that, I'm just going to come back up. And again, because we don't have fluff in there yet, it makes it a lot easier. Some people prefer to get all of the work done first before adding the details because you can kind of see the shape a little bit better. But for such a simple little guy that we're making today, you should be good to go. Awesome. Okay, so that's going to be our first cross. So all I'm doing is going in and out of those stitches. So I'm coming up again. I'm going to go across to give him the second. So in there and across like that. So see when I'm looking now, I'm like, the top is a little, like I wish it was a little bit longer. Super simple because we don't have any fluff yet. I'm just going to come up a little bit more and bring that down and bring that down. And blanket yarn is awesome for that kind of stuff because you don't have to worry about messing up your stitches or your shape. See, I just extended it. Beautiful, beautiful. Now we have a scar. So again, because it's empty, I'm going to flip them inside out. I'm just going to tie that down. And I don't have to worry about weaving in those ends. It just becomes part of his internal portions, his organs, I guess. They're little pieces of yarn. Okay, and we're actually getting close to the end. The only thing we have left, we have a couple of rows left. And in those rows, we're going to do some bobbles and we're going to do some decreases. So this is a great time if you haven't done those before. I'm going to do a very quick little version of that. So we now have flat head, green face, scars, eyeballs, look at that, and a little bitty smirky smile. We're doing pretty good here. Okay, so we are now going to continue with row 12. So it's just going to be another round robin of single crochets. So we are going to have 24 single crochets all the way around. And then our next row, we're going to have bobbles and color changes. So let's see if we still have 24. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let me get some more yarn here. 6, 7. Hello, for those who are just joining, welcome. We are crocheting a very simple Frankenstein monster head. We did a market yesterday. We sold out. It is one of those great $5, $10, $15 items that you can fill your tables up with. Make great little gifts that can fit in the palm of your hand, and they're squishy and look really cute on a shelf. Or honestly, my kids throw them around the house. They make them as like almost like a little soft ball so they don't break a window. But I also have lots of people who like to put them like at their desk at work or on a shelf in the kitchen so when somebody opens it up, they can see it. They're just fun little personality starters, great conversation starters. So I went all the way around with my single crochets. So now what we're going to do is we are going to add our bobbles. So I have an approximation as to how many stitches I do for each bobble, but if you've shifted in any way, the way that I figure out where the bobbles are going to be, so the bobbles are just like big puffy stitches. So if we look at the example, see these black bumps right here that we're kind of, in this case, we're using them either as like the bolts in the neck, or some people like to think of them as little arms or a little body. When I originally designed the pattern, I meant them as the bolts in the neck. So you can even use a different color. Maybe if you want to use a more silvery or gray color, you're welcome to do that. Make this your own for sure. Okay, and so what we want those to be right on the side of the head, right? Because we want them to be obvious what they are. So what I'm going to do is, based on where the center of my face is, I'm just going to fold him so I can kind of evaluate, okay, where is the center? And then you can even use, if you want, stitch markers to say, okay, I think I should put a bobble here, and I think I should put a bobble here if you wanted to. I'm going to give you an estimation of where those spots are based on the ones I've made before. So for the ones I've made before, it was 5 single crochets before the color change. Okay, so let's put our hook in, and let's see where we come up on the 5. So that's the thing about when you're going around and around and you're not doing your slip stitch single crochet start new round, is that you're spiraling. So you're slightly going 1 stitch forward each time you go around. So you're kind of, think about it as like a spiral versus round. If you want it to be perfectly round, then you would do the slip stitch chain 1 to start a new row. But we're doing the amigurumi, which is you just go around and around and around instead. So I already, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. That's pretty close. I think it's just 1 off, really. So just like before when we did our color change, I'm going to show you a simple way to do it with blanket yarn. So you cast on your single crochet like you were going to before. So we go in, yarn over, pull through, and then instead of yarning over again, I'm going to place that color that I'm using for this one. I'm using the black, but again, you can use any color. I'm going to place that right next to where I was already at. I'm going to keep my tension on here so that it's a smooth transition in terms of stitches. And I'm going to yarn over with that new color instead. Okay, so that's my color change. Now we're going to do the bobble stitch. It sounds intimidating. It really is just not finishing your stitch and starting again in the same stitch. So if you think about it as like, I'm going to do a single crochet, or actually technically it's a double crochet. So I'm going to start it, and then before I get all the way through, I'm going to stop and do it again in the same stitch. And that's what builds up your layers. So I'm going to go, for the first one, I'm going to go nice and slow. So I'm going to do my normal yarn over, so as if I was doing a double crochet. I'm going to yarn over first, go into my stitch, yarn over, pull through, and then instead of pulling through, so I'm going to yarn over, instead of pulling through all of them, I'm only going to pull through the first 2 stitches. So see, I yarned over. I'm only going to pull through those first 2 stitches. So now I have 2 on my hook. So think of it as almost like having 2 double crochets on the same hook. And then you're going to do the exact same thing again. We're going to do that until we have 5 loops, because we're doing a 5 loop bobble on the hook. Okay, so I'm going to yarn over, go back in the exact same stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, and again, only those first 2 stitches. So now I have 3. Do it again. Yarn over, pull through, yarn over. Through the first 2 stitches, stop. I got 4. One more time, yarn over. In the stitch, yarn over, pull through. Only the first 2 stitches. Okay, so now how many do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now I know I'm good. But for this particular one, we want 1 bobble stitch in this color because we want to go back to being green, because he doesn't have black all over. He just has that bolt, right? So instead of pulling through with this one like I normally would, like say the next stitch was also going to be black, I would yarn over and pull all the way through. I'm actually going to go back, see how my finger's been holding these 2 together. I'm going to put this guy down. And again, blanket yarn is great for this because you don't have to worry about your tension as much. I'm going to put him down with his friend. So where he started and where he ended. We're going to use these to tie off later. Okay, so I'm going to put them down. I'm going to say, hey, green, you're up. So I'm going to hold them down together. I'm going to hold them taut with my 1 finger. And then I'm going to yarn over with this green and pull everything through. Okay, now it looks giant, but look, it's just one stitch. So it doesn't change your counts at all. So then from there, I'm just going to continue what I was doing before, and I'm going to go in the next stitch. So sometimes you got to pull your bobble forward a little bit so you can see where that next stitch is. I'm just going to pull that forward and just do 1 traditional single crochet right there, like it never happened. And then I use my finger just to push it out. You got that? Okay, 1 second. Got to verify we're still on. Okay, so you have that to the side. and that's the bobble. So that's going to be like his bolt. And on this side, when you're going around, it just looks like one stitch. It's hard to see, I know, black yarn, we know how hard that is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 11. So I already did 1, so let's do 2, 3, 4, 5, whoa, slow down, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh, I really was close. Looks like I'm on 10. We're going to do it at 11 though. 11. Okay. We're going to do that. So I'm going to do the exact same thing here. So just to give myself some ease of working, I'm going to cut that off. Okay. Do you guys remember how to do it? So we are going to do our regular single crochet, but instead of yarning over at the end, we're going to do our color change. Okay. Hold it down like that. And that's what I'm going to use to yarn over. We have our color change. We're ready for our bobble. So I'm going to hold these two together nice and tight. I'm going to keep my finger there so I don't lose any of my tension, because you don't want people to know that you're changing anything. And we're going to make that 5 loop bobble again. So we're going to yarn over, go in the next stitch, under, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, stop after the first 2. Yarn over, do the exact same thing. Yarn over, stick in, yarn over, only through the first 2. Now we have 3. Again. See, you kind of see how you can veg out, zone out a little bit. 4, again. Except you guys remember this time, we do our 2. We have 5 on our hook. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And because we don't want him to have a big black mess right on the side, we're going to go back to our original green yarn. We are going to, let's see how I can show you this the best. We're going to yarn over and pull through all 5 loops. Boom, bobble. So now you have your second bobble. That's the most complicated thing that this requires. The rest, we're there. Okay, so now what we're going to do, we're going to keep those 2 pieces of black down, and we're going to take our bobble, and like I said, it just looks like a single crochet here, and we're just going into our single crochet here. So we're going to just go finish the round with some single crochets in the next stitch. 1, we're going to push that guy out so he sticks out the front. 2, so you should still have 24 single crochets all the way around. Just because you did a bobble does not mean that the amount of stitches all the way around changed. Okay, so I'm going to take out my stitch marker. I'm going to put it back in. This is just because I'm going to go ahead and tie those bobbles stitches yarn together. So see, I'm going to turn them inside out. So on the inside of your bobble, this is all it looks like. So just like when we were making the color change up here, we're just going to tie these off, cut them, and they live on the inside. No weaving in. But again, when you're doing your tie, go down so that you don't hit your single crochets, because you're still going to go around a couple more times. So I'm just doing a basic knot, cutting off. And we're done with the black yarn for today. And then we're going to do the same thing over here. So we're going to tie 1 and 2. Cut it off. This is what we're looking like. Then we're just going to put them back together. So you can kind of see, he'll get more shape once we fill him. But you can kind of see we have our little Frankenstein head with the bobbles for the neck. It looks a little flat right now. Don't worry, he'll look more full when we start filling him. I promise. Okay, so now I'm going to add a little bit of stuffing. So what I'm going to do is he's that nice flat top. I'm going to put that down. I'm going to spread out my stitches a little bit. So I get a, for him, we want him to be more like a cylinder. We don't want him to be bowed like you would like a regular head shape. We want it to be more cylinder. So we have to make sure that we're really thoughtful and all of our stitches are even. So I'm just giving it like a little pull around so that they're all the same tension. So say one place I was a little bit tighter in my stitch than somewhere else. By doing that, we're just evening it out a little bit. So for this, just some basic filling, fiber fill. This happens to be polyfill, but whatever you prefer. Again, some people, or when I have a lot of leftovers because I'm making a lot, I'll throw those in to help with some of the floof. And I'm just pushing it all the way down. I'm going to fill it maybe a little bit more than halfway because we still have to go around a couple of times and you don't want your hook to get stuck in it and start to pull because then you'll actually end up with little fiber in your stitches, which sometimes you can't really tell, but when you're working with a black yarn, it pops through really obviously that you got some filling in there. So I'm just giving him, and you can kind of see where we're going. We're getting some shape here. So for this particular one, I placed the eyes a little bit higher. In other ways, sometimes we put them a little bit lower. It's really your call. Make them whatever you like, what your customer likes. I like to say that every time I make something, there's a slight variation. Each one has its own personality. So sometimes you look at it and you say, today I feel like making him this way. And that's okay because it's art. Okay. So now we're just going to do a single crochet all the way around again. That's going to give it a nice smooth edge for those bobbles. Sometimes I'll do like a decrease right away, but I just find a lot of the time when I do something like a bobble so abruptly when everything else is really simple and that it just gives it like a nice smooth look to it before we start doing our decreases, because decreases do change the shape a little bit. Okay, so we're just going to do 24 all the way around, and I'm just going to show you when I get to that bobble where you put your single crochet. It's the exact same space, but I know it's intimidating because especially if you've never done a bobble before. So I did all my single crochets. There's my bobble. And see, it's hard to tell in the black, but it's just treat it like a regular stitch. No extra stitches, no extra pull, anything. Just treat it like a normal stitch. So under and through. Under and through. I'll show you it again now that I've gone past the first one. And this is why I do the color change the way I do, because see how it's just that one color. You can't tell that you did color changes ahead and before it. It just appears like that one thing is that color. So this is a no sew in terms of having to sew on hands or feet or anything. This one's a no sew. So by using the bobble, that gives you that same look without having to sew anything on, which really speeds up the time. And it's the same thing I do for like our ghosts. So if you look at our ghosts, the ghosts I make, same thing. If you utilize the bobble, see hands and feet of the mushroom boy, it saves you a lot of time than when you're making something like this and you have to make all the pieces separately and then sew them together. So that's why I say these are great little things to make up for markets or as quick gifts. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is just like at the beginning. Remember when we were first making that hair for people who were here with us before that? Again, thanks for staying on this long. So we just like we wanted that nice flat top, we're going to want a nice flat bottom too. Because again, you know, Frankenstein monster's head is kind of more like a cylinder when we see him represented versus rounded. So we're going to want that same shape, and that way he'll also sit nice and flat, more or less, as flat as you can with yarn. So what we're going to do is we're going to do back loop only. Now, it can get a little tricky because I'm also going to start doing my decreases at the same time. You don't have to. If you're like, one thing at a time, Ruthie, can you just slow it down a little bit? You can just do, just like we did at the top, you can do your back loop onlys just once around first. It just gives it a little bit more height. I want to decrease more quickly and give it a slightly rounded look on the bottom so that it has a slight difference. So I'm going to decrease while I do it. So for this, I'm going to do Again, every stitch has a front and a back. So the back loop is going to be the stitch that's farthest away from your face, closest to your hands. That's considered the back loop. So we're going to go into that V, into the back loop only. I'm going to do a single crochet, and then I'm going to do a decrease. And for this, I'm going to do an invisible decrease. And again, this is how you would do it only if you are working in the back loop only. If you were doing both loops, you can do the same model. It's just I want to make sure that you don't think you have to do it this way for every decrease. Because normally when I do a decrease, I would work on the front loops only. So that's why I'm saying for this particular project, for the back loop only portion where we're making it very flat and we're only using the back loops. So I'm going to go in that back loop. I'm going to yarn over. I'm going to pull that out so I have 2 on my hook. I'm going to go directly into the next stitch back loop and do the same thing. Yarn over, pull through. Now I have 3 on the hook. I'm going to yarn over and pull through. So those 2 stitches now became 1, but you still are turning. So you're still turning inwards to get that flat bottom. And we're going to repeat that all the way around. So again, single crochet. And again, we're only working in the back loop for this portion. And decrease. Single crochet. And then decrease. Do you guys get that? Do you need me to show you one more time how we're doing the decrease for the back loop only? I'll continue going if unless someone says something. Okay, so single crochet, back loop only, single crochet. So by the end of this row, we should have 16 stitches. I can actually show you guys a different way if you want. Another way to do the invisible decrease is you go in the first stitch and immediately in the next stitch, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through. That's another way I've seen it done. I interchange depending on what type of yarn I'm using. It just gets a slightly different variation. So like with a blanket yarn, you really can't tell depending on which way you do it. The only time you really see a difference is if you're doing a yarn over versus a yarn under method. When you do that method, you can tell. Yarn under tends to have even tighter stitches. So I know that I make pretty tight stitches already with my yarn over, but yarn under makes it, so I find that it makes things a lot smaller. I mean, not like significantly like you're using a different weighted yarn or a different hook size, but it does come out slightly smaller. And when it comes to crochet, the way that I do it is just specific to me. There is no specific right reason or wrong reason. Or way of doing things. It's whatever feels comfortable for you. And I think that that's the most important thing, that when I'm teaching new individuals how to crochet and they're struggling, find the element that works best for you. Like that's really the way to do it, because I spent a lot of time when I was first starting 6 years ago, I wanted to do it exactly like how the book told me, and it was not working. Everything I made had big gaps in it. It didn't feel comfortable. I was like, I don't know how people do this for hours. It was once I figured out the method that worked well for me that I fell in love with it. I was like, I get it now. So if you're doing it, or especially if you're left-handed, I know today I'm inverted because usually I'm showing you my hands. Today I'm face on. If you're left-handed today, is it easier for you because I'm inverted, or harder? I'm not sure. Does it look like I am using my left hand? Anyway, I know that you guys don't get enough love. I was actually just talking to somebody about that at the market yesterday, that all the tutorials are for right-handed people. And I said, both of my parents are left-handed. So I'm going to teach my mother. Maybe I'll do it on the live so that we can enjoy it together, how it goes. But she's left-handed. So I thought I would take her and use her as an example, so that everything I do, I'm just adding a little bit more fluff, by the way, while I'm talking. Everything I do, she'll do next to me, but left-handed. It would be very interesting, to say the least. I think maybe we should make that a live. What do you guys think? But at least you'll get some love for the left-handed individual. So I'm doing most of my fluffing now, but you can see because we did the decrease in the back loops only, it's getting nice and flat, right? So you're kind of getting that shape all the way back down again. And with blanket yarn, what you need to do is, if you want something that is firm and can stand really well, You're going to want to put a lot of fluff in, and when you're putting it in, you're going to want to spread it out. So spread it towards the end and then stuff down the middle. Spread it to the end, stuff, push down the middle. If you want it to be soft and squishy, like say you're giving it maybe to a child, or you want something that's kind of more for snuggling, I'll call it, then you're going to not put it and pull it so much. You're going to keep it pretty loose. And actually with blanket yarn, there's some things that I make that I put no stuffing in. So like these gummy bears, I don't put any fluff in them. It's just the blanket yarn. So depending on the size of what you're doing, you might not need any yarn. You might not need any fluff at all. Should I say yarn? You need the yarn, but no fluff. So for him, I want to make sure that he's firm enough that he can stand on his own. That way, if someone wants to display him, but not so tough that no one wants to hold him. So I want to still have some give, but I want him to be able to stand. I don't want him to flop over. So that's just what I'm paying attention to when I'm doing my fluff. And I'm trying to pack it down. The other thing I'm trying to do is do some shaping. So I'm trying to get enough up to that. So I'm really trying to push up in the head so he has that nice flat top. So that means that I have to push yarn up into these corners. I guess they're not corners, but the edge where the two meet, the top and the bottom. I'm trying to get it up in those so that he remains that flat top versus rounding over. If you just stuff down, they'll get like a little bow here. So we want to make sure we're spreading it out. So we have a nice flat monster top. And then like, see here, there's a little bit of a gap, which means I have less fluff here than I have here. So I want to make sure that when I'm doing that, I'm pushing it down and out, down and out. And then I want to get around the eyes. Remember, I've done this before. You want to get yarn up above the eyes too, so he's not sunken in eyes. So we got to make sure that we're pushing up and over the back of that safety eye. And then the other thing you want to do with this pattern when you're stuffing is you want to make sure you put a little extra push on the bobble so they really stick out. Because it would be so sad if you did all of that work and then they were just flat. So we want to make sure we push those out. So I'm going to leave it like that. I'm going to do another round of decreases. Then I'll do a little bit more stuff and then we're done. Okay, that's it. I told you it was going to work out fast. And just think, it's taken, how long have we been on? Probably over an hour now. But that's while I'm talking and chatting and doing everything else and stopping to show you guys stuff. So imagine how fast you can do these. So again, for this one, I'm going to do a traditional invisible decrease. So like I said, this is going to go, for me, I like to do them in the front loop only. So again, we have our V shape. The last time we did a decrease, we were doing it in the back loop to get this shape. I'm going to do it in the front loop only this time. And that makes it more of an invisible decrease, so it's harder to see what you're doing. So I'm going to go in the front loop of the first step immediately. It helps me if I turn, so it's kind of like a hook action. Immediately into the next stitch. So I have all of 3 on my loop. I'm going to yarn over, pull through, just like I'm doing a single crochet, yarn over, pull through. Okay? And I'm going to do that all the way around. So in the front loop, immediately in the next stitch, yarn over, pull through the first 2, yarn over, pull through. And that was giving me that decrease. I'm going to do it again. In. So we're doing that all the way around. So in theory, we should end up with 8 stitches, which if you remember, is exactly how many we started with our magic ring. If you're slightly off, it's okay. No big deal. Okay. This is a very forgiving pattern that way. Okay, so I'm just going all the way around with my invisible decreases until I hit that stitch marker. We're going to be winding up. So if you guys have any questions about crocheting, about small business, about trying to sell at markets, what sells well, what does horrible, best practice tips, things I'm making for the Halloween season, anything like that, or you want to know about me, or you want to know about Rokkit Crafts and the 4 women that make all of these things, feel free to ask. This is a good time before we sign off. So that's going to be my final decrease. So I'm going to pull that up only because I want to stuff a little bit more before I fasten off. I'm just going to put my hook here again, just to make sure I don't lose all that wonderful work I just did. And I'm just going to give it a final stuffing. So I'm going to roll so I can kind of see how we're looking. I'm going to give it some more fluff. And now, just like we had to try to get up in those corners, we want to do the same thing for the bottom. So we want to make sure that we're pushing some towards the edges and not just in the middle. And then after this, we are going to sew it closed and we will be done. And again, I'm going to have this pattern up on our Instagram. So like a copy that you can save to your photos and refer back to. It's going to be a very simple version of the pattern written out for you. And that will be on our Instagram, on our Facebook. That will also, we'll repost this video on YouTube. And then we'll put the pattern and video together on our website, rokkitcrafts.com with 2 Ks, 1 I. So ROKKIT crafts.com. And then there's a how-to section. And that's where we put our free tutorials and videos. So there will be like an article that will talk about what we made. It'll have a replay of today's live. It'll have a copy of the pattern. And then, of course, if you prefer not to get your hands dirty and you just would love to have an item yourself, we do have a shop there that you're welcome to do. We do commissions, we do pre-orders, and then, of course, we have some things that are in stock. Anything that's in stock, we ship out same day. So you'll be able to get it quickly. If you're in Massachusetts and you're in our area, you're welcome. We have a contact-free pickup in Westboro, Massachusetts that you can also do if you happen to be local. Okay, I could do this all day. Let's see. There we go. So now we're just going to sew them closed. So I'm giving him the squish test. Sometimes when my kids are home, I'll say, can you give this a squish? Is it too firm? So again, this one I'm making a little bit more firm because I want him to be able to stand when we're done and not fall over. So, but we still want him to have a nice squish to him, that satisfying feel. Okay, so now we're just going to finish off. So I'm going to take it. I'm going to do a slip stitch in the next stitch. So I'm going to go in, yarn over, pull through, and go straight through. I'm going to pull a tail because we're going to do a little, this is the only time we're going to sew anything on this. And that's just to sew them closed. So I'm going to pull through. So if you, when you use yarn, if you get a big bump here, I'm going to show you how I do my closures to avoid that. So again, I'm going to take part of my yarn because it's sometimes hard to start from the end. I'm going to fold it in half. I'm using my larger embroidery needle for this one because it's the blanket yarn. I'm going to fold it in half and that's what I'm going to push through. That way you don't have to worry about trying to get the end in. And then I pull the yarn, pull it through. So to do this, my closures, to make it nice and smooth, a little bit of black there, I go not in the first stitch, but the next stitch, the second stitch, okay? And I'm go all the way under from the inside to the outside, like that. And then I'm going to go backwards into that last stitch that I did, that slip stitch, into just that back loop, right through the middle. And I pull through and it creates like a fake stitch. See, before I close it tight. See how it looks like a little fake stitch? And then when you pull that tight, it just looks like another stitch, but it's secure. It's keeping everything nice and tight so it won't start to unravel. And you can pull it tighter. See? So it looks like a stitch, but it's actually a knot to keep everything you just did from unraveling. We don't want to unintentionally frog our project. And then to do our final closure, what I do is I go in. So again, each stitch has that V shape. I'm going in this back loop, farthest away from me, closest to the center. I'm going down the middle and out. Okay. And then I'm going to do the opposite. So I'm going to go from the inside up, but again, through the middle of the stitch. So it's kind of like an in-out, like wave motion. And you do that for each pair of stitches. So then I'm going to do it again. I'm going to go in just this one, out just this one, in the middle. This is the trick to making a nice, smooth closure without any gap in the middle, without any fluff coming out or anything like that. Okay. And I'll show you. I'm going to do one more, and then I'll show you what it looks like before I pull it. So see, nice and flat. And then the magic is when you pull it, and remember, blanket yarn, pull very gently because it breaks very easily. When I pull it, there's no gap in the middle. So just like with the magic ring when we pulled it, see there's no middle hole. Same with the bottom, no middle hole. And then all you have to do, depending on your level, some makers I know just cut it at this point. I am, because I've lived with a bunch of little boys, I prefer to make things super friendly to be tossed around, thrown around without undoing anything. So I'm going to go in, I go through the fiber, so it kind of gives a little bit of resistance. Pull it tight, but not so much you hurt your shape. And then I do the same thing. I go back in, I go find somewhere else. And I make sure I'm going all the way through the yarn, and then I'm coming up through the gaps of the stitches just to see how much harder it's getting to pull it because I'm going through all that poly felt. And then I kind of squish it, make sure I'm keeping my shape. And I do that again and again and again until I have a good amount of length, just to make sure there's no chance he's going to unravel. In, out, in, out. I'm going to come back up through my center. Okay. I'm going to pull him, pull it a little tight. Again, blanket yarn, don't pull too hard, it will snap. I'm going to cut it off. And then what happens is when you boing back up, it hides inside. See, so you can't even tell where the end is. Then I'm going to give him another rolly, 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 smushy, 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 rolly, 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 smushy, just to move that around to the shape I like. And then we got him. And then I take off the plastic to make sure I didn't ruin anything while I scratched it up while I was making them. And you have a little Frankenstein monster. Now, sometimes what I'll do to add a little bit of flair is I'll put a little bit of white yarn above and below. Do I have any examples of that? I don't today. Let's see. I don't. But I'll put a line of white yarn here from this stitch down and from this stitch down, just to give them like a little bit of a highlight. Sometimes I'll give them little pink cheeks. I do have examples of the pink cheeks. Sometimes I'll give them like a little pink cheek, which is just with pink yarn going around one stitch, just to give them a little bit of a smile. So there's all different things that you can do with the shapes. You can give them eyebrows, you can give them more scars. You can really do whatever you want. And again, just like I showed you earlier, we can do different face, mouth shapes. You can go straight across, you can go up and down, big smiles, little smiles, no smile. I make some things like my ghosts have no smiles. And then our mushroom boys have no smiles, but have the little pink cheeks. So, and the loaf kitties I make, a lot of the time I make them with the eyes, but sometimes it's just the highlights underneath the whisker, but sometimes I add the little lines there. So again, it depends on what you like, what the person likes, what you're feeling that day. Anyway, so we did it. We made a Frankenstein monster. I hope you had fun. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to try to keep the tutorials up as we go out and about more and more. We get asked so many great questions. And so if there's something specific that you would like covered, maybe we'll do a whole one just on how to do the magic ring or just how to start, how to do chain stitches, anything like that. Feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to teach, share. And of course, if you have any interest in any of our makes, we have a website at rokkitcrafts.com. We're on Etsy. We're all over social media. We're 4 handmade crafters who make all different types of things, and we're doing it for the love of what we're doing. So reach out anytime. I appreciate all of you. And if there's no final questions, we will call it a day. We will have this up, a copy of this live today on YouTube, on our website with the written pattern. And we hope to see you again soon. Thank you so much for joining. Bye, guys.